Welcome to part 5 of this 8-part series where I dissect every difference between each Harry Potter book and movie. Today we're going to focus on the 5th book and movie, The Order of the Phoenix. If you haven't seen parts 1 to 4, they are linked down below. I've put a lot of work into the series so far, so you should definitely check them out if you haven't already. Funnily enough, this is my favorite movie in the series, but my least favorite book in the series, so I was both dreading and excited for this video, which is a weird feeling, but in the end it was a lot of fun to make. This is going to be a long video, the longest video I've ever actually made to date, so let's get right into it and get started. I'm going to start each of these videos with the character differences, and there are a lot of new characters to go over, so let's see how the movie versions of these characters match up with the book versions. Luna Lovegood is played by Evanna Lynch, and she literally is Luna. She was perfectly cast. There were only 2 differences that I noticed. One, Luna has silver eyes, while Evanna Lynch has blue eyes. And also, her hair in the book was straggly and untidy, but in the movie, it was always well kept. Nymphadora Tonks was described as having short and spiky pink/purple hair, specifically the first time we see her. And in the movie, she had the same color hair as in the book, but it was longer and not spiky. She's a tough character to highlight for this though, because obviously she can change her appearance being a metamorph magus. Dolores Umbridge was described as looking like a toad in the book, with a broad flabby face, a wide slack mouth, and very little neck, and she was absolutely hideous. But in the film, Umbridge wasn't as ugly as she was in the book, because honestly, Imelda Staunton isn't really ugly. I think she's actually kinda pretty, especially when placed beside the book version of her character. Also, the bow that Umbridge was known for wearing in the book never made an appearance in the movie. Bellatrix Lestrange was also perfectly cast, Helena Bonham Carter bringing the once beautiful character into crazed shambles, but still somehow having an essence of her old beauty. The only difference is her hair. In the book, it was rather straight, but in the movie, it's very curly. Creature the House Elf was also pretty well adapted, but the biggest difference from book to movie was the vast amounts of white hair coming out of his ears, which he did not have in the film. As for Mrs. Figg, she was known to wear a hairnet in the book, but she did not wear one in the movie. Also, when she found Harry and Dudley in the book, she was wearing a pink dressing gown and fluffy slippers, but in the movie, she was wearing a raincoat and no slippers. Alice Longbottom before the attack was seen to have a round face much like her son Neville, but in the movie she had a rather slim face instead. She also had longer hair in the book, but she had more of a crew cut in the film. Frank Longbottom looked spot on when brought to the big screen though, and as did Kingsley Shacklebolt. They nailed his character even down to the golden earring he wore. And the same can be said about Grop. Although that's not hard because they literally created him from scratch in a computer, so it's expected that he would look perfect. And now we move on to the plot. The movie starts off with Harry walking to a playground, but there's actually a lot that happens before that in the book. The book starts off with Harry sitting in a bush outside of the Dursleys' window, and he's listening to the news as Vernon would not let him watch. Then all of a sudden, a loud crack goes off. Harry leaps to his feet, wand at the ready, and then gets whacked in the head when Petunia opened the window. As Harry tried to find the source of the noise, Vernon grabs Harry around the neck, tells him to put his wand away. Harry calls his aunt and uncle stupid, and then walks away. And this is when the book and the movie meet up again as Harry walks to the playground. On his way there, we find out through Harry's thoughts that he was mad at Ron and Hermione for not giving him any news in their letters. Something that differs from the film, where we don't find this out until Harry is already at number 12 Grimmauld Place.
You couldn't put any of this in a letter, I suppose. I've gone all summer without a scrap of news.
While walking to the playground, we also find out through Harry's thoughts about his dreams of reliving Cedric's death, which was actually stated by Dudley in the film, not through Harry himself.
Moaning in your sleep every night? Don't kill Cedric!
Also, this is where we find out Harry is dreaming about dark corridors and locked doors, which we would later find out is the Department of Mysteries. But in the movie, we don't see this until Harry is already at Hogwarts, which is actually 10 chapters away. The movie added a scene where Harry sees a mother calling her son over while at the playground, but this never happened in the book. Although, I think it's an incredible addition that adds so much dimension to how Harry is feeling. In the movie, Dudley and his friends approach Harry at the playground, but in the book, they don't actually see him there and they just pass by. In the film, Dudley is the one to find Harry, but in the book, it's the opposite, as Harry is the one to pursue Dudley. In the book, Dudley's friends left before Harry and Dudley had their confrontation, but in the movie, Dudley's friends were of course there for it. In the film, this back and forth took place at the playground, but in the novel, it took place in the street as the cousins walked home. In the movie, Dudley is the first one to start bullying, but in the book, Harry was actually the first one to take a shot, making fun of Dudley's intellect. In the movie, the Dementor picking Harry up was what made him drop his wand, but in the book, the Dementor did not pick Harry up like that. Instead, it was Dudley hitting Harry in the face after Harry pointed his wand at him that made him drop it. In the film, the Dementor attack happened in a tunnel, but in the book, it actually happened in an alleyway. Harry's Patronus in the book was a stag, and the stag chased the Dementors away. But in the film, it was just a ball of light that chased them away, not a stag. In the book, it was mentioned that Mrs. Figg was a squib, but they never mentioned this in the film. They just made it seem like she was a normal muggle that Dumbledore filled in to protect Harry. Also in the book, Mrs. Figg was not the only person guarding Harry while he was at the Dursleys, as Mundungus Fletcher was as well. However, his character was cut from the movie entirely. We find out that that crack we had heard earlier was Mundungus disapparating, and it was his fault that Harry had to use magic, because Mundungus was off selling stolen cauldrons instead of doing his job and protecting Harry. While walking back to the Dursleys in the book, Mundungus appears, stinking of alcohol and tobacco, and Mrs. Figg hits him over the head with her bag, telling him to go straight to Dumbledore, events that of course never happened in the film. In the film, the letter that expelled Harry spoke, almost like a howler but without screaming. However, in the book, it was just a normal letter that Harry simply read. It did not talk out loud. Also, unlike in the film where the Dursleys found out about Harry being expelled from the letter, in the book, they find out from Harry, who just told them. In the movie, the scene ends here, but there's a lot more to the scene in the book. 1. The letter expelling Harry was the only letter that arrived in the film, but in the book, there were 5 letters that arrived. The second letter came from Mr. Weasley telling Harry to stay put and saying that Dumbledore was trying to fix the situation. We also see Dudley explaining what happened and how he felt cold and unhappy, and Harry says that he did not do it, but Dementors did. And to everyone's shock, Petunia not only knows what Dementors are, but says that they guard the wizarding prison Azkaban. Then the third letter arrives, this one from the Ministry saying that he was not expelled yet, and that the final ruling would be decided in a court hearing in August. This differs from the film, as this information was not delivered to the audience through a letter, but through Kingsley.
Dumbledore has persuaded the minister to suspend your expulsion pending a formal hearing.
A hearing?
Uh-huh.
Then the fourth letter arrives, this time from Sirius, which says the same thing as Arthur, telling him to stay put. The rest of the conversation between Harry and the Dursleys that was cut from the film then turns to Harry telling them that Voldemort, the man that murdered his parents, was back. And Petunia immediately understood the gravity of this, and for the first time in his life, Harry fully appreciated that Aunt Petunia was his mother's sister. However, Vernon then kicks Harry out of the house, saying that he was putting his family in danger. But just then, the fifth letter arrives, this time a howler for Petunia, and it says, "Remember my last, Petunia," which we later find out was from Dumbledore. After hearing this, Petunia goes against her husband and says that Harry was staying. That night in the movie, we see Petunia and Vernon take Dudley to the hospital and see the advance guard come for Harry. But in the book, neither of these things happen that night. 4 days go by before this happens, and on the 4th day, the Dursleys do not leave to take Dudley to the hospital like in the movie, but rather, they went to an event where they thought they were being honored for winning the best kept suburban lawn. However, this was the work of Tonks to get them out of the house so they could pick up Harry. We also see a scene where Harry punches the wall in frustration, but then picks up a picture of his parents, which calms him. A scene with some amazing writing, but this never happened in the book. This amazing scene was made just for the film. In the film, Harry was sleeping when the advance guard showed up, but in the book, he was awake when they arrived. Also in the film, they came to his bedroom, but in the book, they were actually downstairs and Harry came down to them. In the book, there were 9 members of the advance guard: Mad-Eye, Tonks, Lupin, Kingsley, Alpheus Doge, Daedalus Diggle, Emmeline Vance, Sturgis Podmore, and Hestia Jones. But in the movie, there were only 5 members: Moody, Tonks, Kingsley, Emmeline Vance, and Alpheus Doge. Before leaving in the book, a lot happens that the movie skipped over. We see Lupin introduce everyone to Harry, which included the scene where Tonks gets mad about being called by her first name.
Don't call me Nymphadora.
But instead of Moody saying this like in the film, it's Lupin who does so. We also see Tonks help Harry pack his things, and this is where we see her hair change from purple to pink. And she actually did this on purpose, whereas in the film, she did this when she got angry at Moody, and it looked like she did not mean to do it. While in Harry's bedroom, Tonks explains that she's a metamorph magus, meaning she could change her appearance at will, but this was never explained in the movie, though it was shown and sort of implied, but the term metamorph magus was never said. The journey from the Dursleys to Grimmauld Place is very different when we compare the book to the movie. In the film, they use magic to call their broomsticks to them, but in the book, they just had them in their hand when they walked out of the house. In the novel, the journey is much more serious and much more dangerous than in the film. We see Moody take extra precaution, as we see him put a charm on Harry so that his body blended in with any background like a chameleon. In the novel, they have to wait for a signal, which were red and green sparks that hit the sky, but it was much more casual in the film as they just took off with no signal. In the movie, they fly low and go over the river in London, and it's sort of a fun experience, but in the book, it was not fun at all. They don't go over the river, but fly super high in the sky, making everyone cold and their hands numb as they hold their broom. Moody also made them change direction, altitude, and speed, ensuring that no one was following them. When they arrive at Grimmauld Place in the book, Moody uses Dumbledore's Deluminator to put the lights out, but he does not do this in the movie. In the film, Grimmauld Place revealed itself when Moody hit his staff on the ground 3 times, but in the book, it was a bit more complicated. The movie left out the bit about Dumbledore being the secret keeper of the house, meaning only those that Dumbledore told about it could see it. So the house revealed itself when Moody handed Harry a piece of paper written by Dumbledore that told Harry its location. And then, since everyone there had been told by the secret keeper, the house revealed itself. When Harry entered Grimmauld Place in the movie, he saw the meeting taking place with Sirius, but in the book he did not see this. Molly met him at the entrance to ensure that didn't happen. In both the book and the film, Harry saw the heads of the dead house elves, but while in the film they were in jars, in the book they were on plaques. Also, Harry did not see Kreacher on his way up. It wasn't until later that we meet the old house elf, and I'll get back to that later. In both the book and the movie, we see Harry yell at Ron and Hermione and then see Fred and George enter, but while the scene ends here in the movie, there's much more to the scene in the book. Ginny enters the room, and they explain that Percy was promoted to a position in Fudge's office, and how Mr. Weasley told Percy that the only reason he got the job was so that Fudge could keep a closer eye on the Weasley family, who we knew was close to Dumbledore. Percy did not take kindly to this though, and he disowned his own family, joining Fudge and the Ministry on their crusade to discredit both Dumbledore and Harry about Voldemort returning. In the movie, they used the extendable ears to hear the meeting, but in the book, they were unable to do this, as Mrs. Weasley had put a charm on the door so that it blocked all sound coming out. Though the twins did try to use the extendable ear after the meeting ended, but it was just them and not everyone else with them, and they were not able to hear anything as everyone walked away before they got the chance. What happened next was Tonks tripping over the umbrella stand, which in the movie happened before the meeting rather than after like in the book. Also, there was a lot more to this, as she not only knocked over the umbrella stand, but ripped off a curtain to reveal a painting of an old woman, who we later find out is Sirius's mother and the former owner of this house. She screams at the top of her lungs about half-breeds, mutants, and freaks in her house, and how outraged she is about this. In the movie, Sirius and Harry being reunited was a nice moment with all smiles and a hug, which is actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie. In the book, however, it wasn't quite as happy and sweet. Instead, Sirius just grimly says hello to Harry, and there was no hug like in the film. The two then talk unexcitedly about this being where Sirius grew up. This also differs from the film, because in the movie, Sirius tells Harry this during Christmas break, not during summer break.
What, you grew up here?
This is my parents' house.
At dinner in the novel, there were a few more guests that did not appear in the movie, like Bill Weasley and Mundungus Fletcher, both of whom were cut from the film entirely. In the movie, Mrs. Weasley yelled at the twins for using magic when they apparated behind her and scared her.
No! Just because you're allowed to use magic now does not mean you have to whip your wands out for everything!
But in the book, she yelled at them for using magic after they tried to bewitch a good portion of the dinner to the table, but spilled it and nearly cut Sirius's hand off with a knife. During dinner in the movie, Tonks turns into both a pig and a duck, but in the book, the only animal that she turned into was a duck. She did not turn into a pig. In the film, they just jump right into telling Harry what's going on, but in the book, there was a lot leading up to this. Sirius and Molly get into a fight about telling Harry, Molly saying that he should not know, and Sirius saying that he had every right to know. This is where Molly tells Sirius that Harry is not James, and Molly says that Harry is as good as her son. Lines that in the film weren't said here, but were said in the Order meeting and overheard through the extendable ears.
He's not James. Harriet. He's not your son. He's as good as.
But as I said, that scene never actually took place in the book. The argument between Sirius and Molly got so intense that Sirius got to his feet after Molly took a low blow about him being locked up in Azkaban, but eventually Molly backed down and agreed to let Harry and almost all of the kids hear this. In the book though, Ginny was sent up to bed and could not hear this talk about the Order, but in the movie she was very clearly there for this. In this conversation, we got loads more information in the book than we did in the film. The movie left out the fact that Harry ruined Voldemort's plan by surviving and warning the very last person Voldemort wanted to know about his return, Dumbledore, the only man Voldemort ever feared. This meant that Voldemort was lying low and was not killing anyone or causing disappearances, something that differs from the film, as they clearly state that there are disappearances occurring.
That these disappearances are the work of notorious mass murderer Sirius Black.
In this conversation, we're also told that Dumbledore was out there spreading the word of Voldemort's return, but that this came at a price. He was being dragged through the mud by Fudge and the Ministry to discredit him. He was voted out of the chairmanship of the International Confederation of Wizards, as they said he was getting old and losing it. They had also demoted him from Chief Warlock on the Wizengamot, or the Wizard High Council, and they were even thinking about taking away his Order of Merlin First Class. In the movie, we saw Harry read the headlines about himself in the Daily Prophet on the front page, but this differs from the book because 1, they never pulled out a newspaper during this talk, and 2, Harry was never featured on the front cover. He was just thrown under the bus in sly ways throughout more minor articles. After this talk, the movie cuts right to them being asleep, but before that in the book, we see Harry, Ron, Fred, and George discuss the weapon that Sirius had mentioned, and they talk about what they think it can do. In the movie, Harry has nightmares about Voldemort being expelled and his hearing.
You are hereby expelled.
Before the entire Wizengamot.
But in the book, he did not dream about any of this and did not have a nightmare, but instead had a random dream about Hagrid and some of his crazy creatures. The movie cuts right from that night to the day of the hearing, but there's a lot that happens in between these two scenes, as several days go by. The day after Harry arrived, the trio, the Weasley children, and Mrs. Weasley all take down a bunch of doxies that infested a room. We see the twins pocket a few though, telling Harry that they were going to experiment with their venom for some of their joke products. This is then where we hear of Weasley's Wizard Wheezes for the first time in this novel. But this differs from the movie because in the film, we don't hear about it at Grimmauld Place during the summer, but rather after the term at Hogwarts had already started while in the Gryffindor common room. Going back to what happened in between these two scenes, we find out that the twins have been running their joke shop as a mail order service out of the Daily Prophet. We also see Molly and Mundungus get into a fight after Mundungus tried to hide stolen cauldrons at the house, which infuriated Molly. This is also where we meet Kreacher for the first time, which differs from the movie as we met him when Harry was walking up the stairs when he first arrived instead. And instead of being alone when he met him, Harry was with the trio and the Weasley kids. Hermione tries to convince Sirius of freeing Kreacher, as she was still very much into SPEW, or the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, the society she started in the last book to fight for house elf rights, something that, like in the last film, was cut completely from this movie. Sirius, however, tells Hermione that they can't free Kreacher as he knew too much about the Order. In between these two scenes, we also get a moment that in the film took place during Christmas break rather than summer break like in the book, and that was the introduction of the Black family tree. Instead of just Harry being there though, Ron, Hermione, and the Weasley kids were there as well. Also, the family tree was just on a tapestry in the book, but in the film, it was literally on the walls as the wallpaper. The film left out a few details when explaining the tree, as Sirius talks about his brother Regulus, who died 15 years ago after becoming a Death Eater, but then got cold feet and was killed for wanting to turn back. This, however, was not the true story, which we find out in the Deathly Hallows, but I'll wait for part 7 of this series to go over that. After Sirius talks about Regulus, the others leave and Harry and Sirius are left alone just like in the film, and we have a few more details that the movie left out, like the fact that Narcissa Malfoy was on the tree as she used to be a Black, meaning Sirius was related to Draco, and the fact that Tonks was not on the tree even though she was meant to be, as her mother was disowned by the family when she married a Muggle-born. And on top of that, we find out that Sirius is actually related to the Weasleys, and all of this shocks Harry. Several more days go by in between these two scenes, and the book and the film finally meet up again on the morning of Harry's trial. In the movie, the telephone booth that led to the ministry was on a very beautiful street, but in the book, it was quite the opposite, as it was on a very run-down street and next to a dumpster. In the film, you put Muggle money in to make the telephone booth go down.
I'll just get my Muggle money.
But in the book, there's much more to this. You do not put Muggle money in, but dial the number 62442, which actually spells out magic. And then a female voice speaks out saying, "Welcome to the Ministry of Magic, please state your business," which of course did not happen in the movie. Although the female voice did make an appearance later on in the movie.
Department of Mysteries.
After that, it deposited a visitor's badge for Harry to wear, and then that's when it went down. The ministry in the film is pretty accurate, but one big difference was the statue of magical brethren. In the book, it was one fountain with a wizard standing over everything else, then below him a witch. Then staring up at the humans in awe was a centaur, a goblin, and a house elf. However, in the movie, it was two separate fountains, the human having a separate pool from the other creatures. And on top of that, the witch did not stand with the wizard, it was just one human. There also was not a banner of fudge in the novel, that was made just for the movie. There's a lot that happens in the ministry that day that was not shown in the movie. 1. Harry had to go to a security check where he handed over his wand. 2. We see Harry and Mr. Weasley stop by the Auror's office to see Kingsley. And 3. We see Harry go to Mr. Weasley's office and spend a good amount of time there before his trial. In the movie, Kingsley was the one who told Mr. Weasley that Harry's trial had been changed, but in the book, it was a man named Perkins. Also, this did not happen in the elevator like in the movie, but rather in Mr. Weasley's office. In the film, Kingsley says it's in 5 minutes.
They've changed the time of your hearing.
When is it?
In 5 minutes.
But in the book, Perkins did not say that it starts in 5 minutes, but rather that it started 5 minutes ago. In the book, Amelia Bones and Umbridge sat right next to Fudge on either side of him, but in the book, they were in the crowd of the jury pretty far away from him. Also, there was the added detail of Percy Weasley taking notes, and he acted like he did not recognize Harry, but he was not present for this scene in the film. In the book, Dumbledore conjured himself a comfy armchair, but in the film, he just stood the whole time. In the novel, there was the added detail of Amelia Bones cutting Fudge off, being very impressed and asking Harry if he could really conjure a true Patronus charm, but this did not happen in the film. In the film, Mrs. Figg took Harry's seat and Harry sat to the side, but in the book, Dumbledore conjured her a comfy armchair just like his next to himself and Harry. Another added detail that the movie left out was Fudge losing his temper when it was clear he was losing, and he called Harry out, saying that he had a bad habit of using magic outside of school. But Dumbledore tells him that he's being unreasonable and tells the minister to come to a verdict. The movie cuts right from the trial to them at King's Cross, but there's a lot that happens in between these two scenes in the book. As everyone exited the courtroom, there's a moment where Percy passes Mr. Weasley, and Percy completely ignores his father. On their way up from the courtroom, they see Fudge speaking with Lucius Malfoy, a scene that in the film took place before the trial, not after. In the movie, they don't say anything to each other, they just stare each other down. But in the book, they do speak, as Lucius made fun of both Harry and Arthur, and Harry shot back, implying that Lucius had been at the graveyard the night that Voldemort returned in a very sly way. Lucius and Fudge then went off on their own to deal with private matters about money. In between these two scenes, we also see Harry return to Grimmauld Place, where everyone celebrates him getting off except Sirius, who sulks in his room as he had hoped that Harry would be expelled so he would have company at the house. On the last day of the summer holiday, both Ron and Hermione find out that they're made prefects, an idea that was of course cut from the film entirely. For being made a prefect, Mrs. Weasley asked Ron what he wanted as a present, and Ron asked for a broomstick, which Mrs. Weasley agreed to. Mrs. Weasley then goes to Diagon Alley to get everyone's books as well as Ron's new broomstick, and they have a party in Ron and Hermione's honor that night. During this party, Moody shows Harry a picture of the original Order of the Phoenix, a scene that in the film was shown to him by Sirius instead, and that was at King's Cross, not at Grimmauld Place like in the book. On top of that, Sirius showing him this picture was a nice moment that Harry appreciated, but in the book, Moody showing it to Harry was disturbing. Seeing all of these young happy people, including his parents, who would go on to experience so much tragedy, upset Harry so much that he excused himself. Also in the film, Harry kept the photo and actually hung it for all of the DA to see.
You keep it.
But in the book, he did not keep it. The night then gets even more grim when Harry walks in on Mrs. Weasley facing a boggart. When he entered, he saw Ron's dead body, then saw it turn into the dead body of each of the Weasley children, and then to Harry himself. Lupin then entered, took care of the boggart, and held Mrs. Weasley as she sobbed, and as Molly cried, she said that she was afraid everyone was going to die. The book and the movie meet up again the next morning when they go to King's Cross. In the book though, there's a lot more to their journey. In both the book and the film, Tonks was part of the guard that escorted them, but in the book, she was disguised as an old woman, while in the film, she was just her normal self. In the novel, Mrs. Weasley also escorted them, but she was not present for this scene in the film. On top of that, Moody was surprised to see Sirius at King's Cross, as if he had just shown up out of nowhere.
Padfoot, are you barking mad? You'll blow the entire operation.
But in the book, it was not a surprise to see him, as Sirius walked with them the entire way. Also, Moody had a cap that covered his magical eye, but in the film, he did not try to hide it. In the movie, Sirius went to his human form, but in the book, he stayed in his dog form the whole time, and when the train started to move, he chased after it until it rounded the corner. The movie then cuts to the dream sequence where Harry sees Voldemort on platform 9 3/4, but this did not happen in the book, though I think this was a great addition that shows Harry and Voldemort's connection in a very visual and artsy way. On the train ride in the film, Harry got a seat with Hermione and Ron, but in the book, this was not the case, as the two had to go sit in the prefix carriage. They don't join him until later on. Instead, Harry sits with Ginny, Neville, and Luna Lovegood. And that's another big difference between the book and the film. We meet Luna on the train, not in the carriages. Also in the book, the first time we see Neville was on the train, whereas in the movie, the first time we see him was also on the carriages like Luna. In the book, Ginny was the one to introduce Luna, but in the film, they had Hermione do this.
Everyone that says Luna Lovegood.
There's a lot that happens on this train ride that the movie left out. Neville shows off his magical cactus, which ends up squirting thick dark liquid everywhere, and right when this happens, Cho Chang shows up, which embarrasses Harry to no end. Also, this differs from the film, because like with Luna and Neville, the first time we see her in the movies is at the carriages, while in the book it was on the train. When Hermione and Ron join them in their compartment, they tell Harry that Malfoy was made a prefect as well, which again we did not see in the movie. Other things that happened on the train ride that we didn't see in the film was Hermione saying that the Quibbler, the magazine that Luna was reading, was rubbish, and Luna telling her that her father was the editor, which made Hermione very embarrassed. We also see Malfoy stop by their compartment, and he says that he'll be dogging Harry's footsteps, something that makes both Harry and Hermione worried that Malfoy knew the dog on the platform was Sirius. In both the book and the film, we see our heroes on the Hogsmeade platform, but what happens on the platform differs from book to movie. In the film, we see Harry go after Malfoy, but that never happened in the book. Instead, they notice Professor Grubbly Plank rounding up the first years to go across the lake, which is normally Hagrid's job. In the movie though, Professor Grubbly Plank was cut entirely. The movie also cut the Sorting Hat song and the sorting ceremony. In the book, students stare at Harry with horrified looks while in the Great Hall, but in the film, this happened in the Gryffindor common room. Also in the film, Harry enters the common room alone, but in the book, he entered with Neville by his side as he had just given Harry the password. In the movie, the fight with Seamus happened in the common room, but in the book, it took place in their dormitory. In the film, the fight ended with Harry and Ron leaving the common room and going to their dormitory, but in the book, they were of course already in their dormitory, so instead it ended when Ron threatened Seamus with his prefix status, and Neville putting Seamus in his place standing up for Harry. Also, Harry did not snap at Ron the way he did in the film. Instead, they all just went to bed. After that night, the movie cuts to the first Defense Against the Dark Arts class, but there's a lot that happens in between these two scenes. The next morning, we see Angelina, the new Gryffindor Quidditch captain, come up to Harry telling him to be there for keeper tryouts the next Friday. We also see the trio go to History of Magic, see Cho come up to Harry in the courtyard, which was ruined by Ron when he insulted Cho about her favorite Quidditch team, and we see the trio go to Potions, where Snape vanishes the potion out of Harry's cauldron which he had been working all class on. On top of that, we saw Harry storm off from Ron and Hermione in the Great Hall, and later, right before divination, Ron tells Harry to stop taking his temper out on them. After divination, this is where the book and the film meet up again as they go to Defense Against the Dark Arts. In the movie, this class was with students from all 4 houses, but in the novel, this class was just with the Gryffindors. In the film, Umbridge gave them their books, but in the novel, the students had bought their books themselves prior to the school year. In both the book and the film, Umbridge gives Harry detention, and when their argument continues in the movie, she tells Harry to come to her office.
See me later, Mr. Potter. My office.
However, in the book, she actually tells Harry to go to McGonagall's office, not hers. In the film, Harry only got 1 detention, while in the book, he got a whole week's worth of detention. The movie cuts right from the Defense Against the Dark Arts class to Harry's detention, but there's a lot that happens in between these two scenes. As I said, we saw Harry go to McGonagall's office, and we also see Hermione tell the twins that they can't test their joke candy on students, which they were in the middle of doing on first years. We see Hermione put hand-knitted hats in the common room covered with garbage, hoping to trick the house elves into getting clothes and being set free when they clean the common room. We see the trio go to Charms, Transfiguration, and Care of Magical Creatures. And in Care of Magical Creatures, Malfoy makes a comment about how Hagrid might be injured by something too large for him, meaning giants. We also see Angelina tell Harry off at dinner for getting detention the night of tryouts after she had told him to be there. Then the book and the film meet up again when Harry goes to Umbridge's first detention in her office that night. This scene matches up pretty well from book to movie, but there was one detail that the film left out, and that was Harry's scar hurting right when Umbridge touched him, though we later find out that this was just a coincidence and there was no correlation. In the movie, Hermione was the one to notice Harry's hurt hand while in the common room.
What's wrong with your hand?
But in the book, it was actually Ron that noticed this while in the hallway, and he was the one to tell Harry to go to Dumbledore, not Hermione. Just before that, Harry had caught Ron practicing with his broomstick to try out for keeper, and this whole arc, and Quidditch in general, was cut from the movie entirely, and I'll be going over that arc throughout the video. While Harry was in detention Friday night, Ron went to the tryout, and later on in the common room, Ron proudly said that he had made the team. The movie sort of shifts away from the book here, as it focused much more on isolating Harry from others, which by the way was done through some amazing filmmaking and writing techniques from David Yates, the new director, and Michael Goldenberg, the new screenwriter. But I've highlighted that in other videos, so I won't do it here. But the scene that was rewritten from book to movie that really isolated Harry, especially from Ron and Hermione, was the scene where Hermione noticed Harry's hurt hand and he stormed off from Ron and Hermione.
You don't understand.
Help us to.
However, in the book, there was never the same rift between them. It was fixed very early on when Ron told Harry to stop snapping at them. The way the film did it made the whole beginning of the movie isolate Harry. That's the whole point. Another example of how they did this was changing the letter that Harry wrote to Sirius, making it much more about Harry's loneliness.
In spite of being back at Hogwarts, I feel more alone than ever.
Whereas in the book, it was much more vague and did not highlight anything deep or important. And following the scene where Harry writes the letter, we see a brilliantly placed and beautifully written scene with Luna that did not happen in the book, where Luna makes Harry realize that he's stronger when others are close to him.
Well, if I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else. Because if it's just you alone, you're not as much of a threat.
This is the start to a magnificently written theme throughout the movie, a theme that the book didn't really share. We only really hear about it from Dumbledore in the final talk at the end of the book. And making that one little point in that conversation the theme of the movie makes us give huge credit to the screenwriter Goldenberg. And honestly, I think that's one of the things that makes the film so much better than the novel in my opinion. It has a solid theme and sticks to it through every beat of the story, the theme being that Harry needs to rely on his friends and loved ones for strength. Like the scene with Luna, the scene where Harry realizes the importance of those around him and goes back to Ron and Hermione to make up with them never happened in the book either. Because as I said, in the book, they did not have the same rift. This was pretty much all made for the film. What follows in the movie is Umbridge becoming High Inquisitor, but there's so much that happens before this in the novel. While in the Owlery, Harry saw a Thestral flying over the Forbidden Forest, something that differs from the film, as he of course saw this standing outside of Hagrid's hut instead. While up in the Owlery, Harry has a moment with Cho that was not in the book, where Cho praises Harry for his bravery of standing up to Umbridge in class about Cedric. We also find out that the Ministry now knows that Sirius is in London, and Harry and Hermione agree that this was the work of Lucius Malfoy after he saw Sirius in his dog form on platform 9 3/4. During the first Quidditch practice, Ron does terribly, especially when Slytherin students sit in the stands and torment him. Ron also receives a letter from Percy that was not in the film, and Percy congratulates him on being made a prefect, then encourages him to distance himself from Harry and Dumbledore. He praised the lovely Dolores Umbridge, and he bashed their parents, which made Ron so mad that he burned the letter. Just then, Sirius's head appeared in the fire in the common room, a scene that in the film took place much later, well after Umbridge was made High Inquisitor, which we don't get to until the next morning, and that's where the book and the film meet up again. In both the book and the movie, Umbridge is given the power to inspect teachers, and in the film, this was shown through a montage, which I honestly think is up there with some of the best editing in the entire Potter series. However, this makes my job hard because there's a lot to unpack in these scenes as to what happened in the book and what did not happen in the book. Umbridge pushing apart the kids making out did not happen in the book, nor did her dress code and fixing the boys' ties and tucking their shirts in. She also did not stop Fred and George from playing with their fireworks or ban Weasley products. All of this was made just for the film. Also in the book, there were only 5 educational decrees made by Umbridge. One that banned student organizations, one that gave her authority over punishments, one that banned teachers from giving students any information that was not related to their subject, one that banned the Quibbler, and one that made her take the place of Dumbledore as headmaster, but this last one never passed. In the film, however, Umbridge made well over 100 decrees, almost none of which were in the book, so almost everyone shown in this montage did not appear in the novel. In both the book and the film, Umbridge inspected Flitwick's class, but in the movie, he was for some reason a chorus teacher, while in the book, he was of course teaching charms, not chorus. Also, Umbridge did not measure him like in the film, though I think that was one of the funniest details ever added to a Potter film. As for Snape's inspection, this actually did not happen for some time in the book, being 2 chapters later, so this scene was pushed up a great deal for the movie, obviously so it could be part of the montage. Also, in that scene, he did not hit Ron over the head like he did on screen. And there was one inspection that was cut from the film, and that was the one with Professor McGonagall. In that class, Umbridge tries to interrupt, and this makes McGonagall tell her that she does not usually allow interruptions, putting Umbridge in her place. This is when the book and the movie meet up again, as Hermione proposes that Harry teaches Defense Against the Dark Arts to them and any others who would want it. In the film, Harry does not say anything when this is proposed, but in the book, he gives a speech to Ron and Hermione about how different it is to face Voldemort. A speech that in the film was not placed here, but rather during the meeting in the Hog's Head.
When you're a second away from being murdered, or watching a friend die right before your eyes, you don't know what that's like.
In the common room is also where Hermione said the name Voldemort for the first time, whereas in the movie, they also placed this during the meeting in the Hog's Head.
Because if we're going to have any chance of beating Voldemort,
The film cuts right from this conversation in the common room to the Hogsmeade trip where the meeting in the Hog's Head took place, but there's a lot that happened in between these two scenes. 2 weeks go by with no mention of Hermione's idea of Harry teaching them Defense Against the Dark Arts, until one day while in the library, Hermione asked Harry if he had thought about it, and Harry finally agrees. Another week goes by before the Hogsmeade trip, and then that's where the book and the film meet up again for the meeting. There are a few differences with this meeting when we compare the book to the movie though. Cho. In the film, Cho shows up alone, but in the book, she shows up to the meeting with her friend Marietta, but Marietta's character was cut from the film entirely. In the movie, it was Luna who asked Harry if he could produce a Patronus charm.
Is it true you can produce a Patronus charm?
But in the book, this was not said by Luna, but by Susan Bones, who explains that her auntie was Amelia Bones, who had been very impressed when this came up in the trial. Also in the movie, Neville was the one to mention that Harry killed the basilisk with the sword of Gryffindor.
And he killed a basilisk? With the sword in Dumbledore's office?
But in the book, this was Terry Boot, who had been told by one of the portraits in Dumbledore's office. Neville did go on to say that Harry saved the Sorcerer's Stone from Voldemort a second later though. There was also the added detail of Cho speaking up and mentioning all of the tasks that Harry faced in the Triwizard Tournament the year before. The Hogsmeade trip ends after the meeting at the Hog's Head, but in the book, the trip continues, and as they leave, Ron is horrified to find out that the boy that Ginny showed up with named Michael Corner is actually her boyfriend. Harry then puts together that it now makes sense why Ginny could talk to him this past summer and during the school year, which she could not do before, as she had such a big crush on him that she was too shy to do so, but all of this was never mentioned in the film. While walking through Hogsmeade, this is also where Hermione says the line,
At least we know one positive thing that came from today.
What's that?
Cho couldn't take her eyes off you, could she?
a line that in the film was said while on the bridge, not in Hogsmeade. Also, Ginny was not there to hear this and get jealous like in the movie, and on top of that, she wouldn't have gotten jealous like that in the book because she was dating Michael, but the film of course took that arc out, so it makes sense why she got jealous in the film, and it's actually a nice little detail that the movie was able to throw in there a few times. In both the book and the film, Umbridge releases an educational decree banning all student organizations that did not have her stamp of approval, but how she found out about the trio's group to push this decree forward differs from book to movie. In the film, she just heard them talking about it when looking down on the grounds, but in the book, she found out through an informant who had been in the Hog's Head when they formed the club. When they speculate on who could have ratted on them, Hermione says no one did, as they would know thanks to the jinx she put on the piece of paper that everyone signed. So if anyone ratted, they would have had terrible acne on their face, a plot point that the movie left out. Also, on that parchment, it said Dumbledore's Army at the top, but when they signed it in the book, it did not say that yet, as they had not yet picked a name for the group. It's not until the first meeting that they decided on this name. The movie cuts to the scene where they discover the Room of Requirement, but there's a lot that happens before this in the book. The movie cut a scene that makes you hate Umbridge even more. We see Harry get Hedwig back with Sirius's letter, and to his horror, he notices that she's been injured. When he takes her to Professor Grubbly Plank to fix her up, McGonagall is there as well, and she tells Harry that all communication in and out of the castle is being monitored, meaning that Umbridge was the one to hurt Hedwig with the help of Filch. The letter that was attached to Hedwig from Sirius said to meet him in the fire again, meaning Umbridge now knew about their meeting. When they met Sirius in the common room fireplace, he suddenly disappears mid-conversation, and Umbridge's hand comes out of nowhere, reaching and grabbing about the flames, trying to get to Sirius. Luckily though, he escapes. Another moment that took place before finding the Room of Requirement was Malfoy saying that Harry was going to end up in St. Mungo's hospital for being insane, a line that in the film did not take place in the hallways at Hogwarts, but while at Hogsmeade Station.
What'd I tell you? Complete nutter. Just stay away from me!
In the book though, instead of Harry charging at Malfoy, it was Neville, and Harry and Ron had to hold him back. Ron wonders why Neville acted like this, but Harry knew this was because Neville's parents were driven into insanity themselves, and both currently resided in St. Mungo's hospital. After one Quidditch practice, while in the locker room, Harry's scar hurts, and he tells Ron that this happened because Voldemort was angry. At Ron's prodding, Harry thinks back to when his scar hurt in Umbridge's office, and he says that time, Voldemort had been happy. Impressed, Ron says that Harry is reading Voldemort's mind, but Harry corrects him, saying he's just feeling Voldemort's extreme moods. That night, Harry was awakened by Dobby the house elf, and he tells Harry about the Room of Requirement, and he suggests that Harry use this for his club. This differs from the film, as Neville was the one to find the room, not Dobby. This also meant that the scene with Neville being bullied right before finding the room never happened in the book either. Also, Dobby was of course cut from the film entirely, which was a big change from book to movie. In the film, Hermione knew what the Room of Requirement was, and she explained it to everyone.
The Room of Requirement only appears when a person has real need of it. and is always equipped for the Seeker's needs.
But in the book, she had no idea what it was. Instead, Dobby was the one to explain it, and Hermione actually questioned Harry when he told her what Dobby had said, but ultimately she was wrong and the place was perfect. Hermione did show off her intelligence though when she made the DA coins, sneaky ways of writing messages to the DA members telling them the time and the place of a meeting in a very inconspicuous way, but the movie left these coins out. The movie then moves on to a montage of the DA lessons, but before we can get to that, there were a few things that happened before the montage. First, we see the first Quidditch match of the season take place, Gryffindor vs Slytherin, which the film of course cut. The match does not start out great, as the Slytherins all sing a song called "Weasley is Our King." The point of the song basically being that Ron was such a bad keeper, he just handed the Slytherins points. And that's exactly what he does. He let them score 3 times right off the bat. Luckily though, Harry ends up catching the snitch to end the game early, and this ensured that Gryffindor won the match. After the match though, Malfoy insulted Mr. and Mrs. Weasley as well as Harry's mother Lily, and this led to Harry and George attacking, punching, and beating the crap out of Malfoy. While Harry and George were in McGonagall's office, Umbridge came in, pulled out a new decree that gave her the authority over all punishments, meaning McGonagall lost all power when it came to what happened to Harry and George, and Umbridge banned the two from ever playing Quidditch again and took their broomsticks. And she did the same to Fred, stating that had he not been held back by his teammates, he too would have gone after Malfoy. In the aftermath, the trio sat in the common room and noticed that Hagrid was back, something that is very different from the film, as in the book, he did not return until after Christmas holiday, but here it was well before the holiday. In the film, this was during the day and they ran down in the open, but in the book, this was late at night and they wore the invisibility cloak. In the film, Umbridge was there when they arrived, but in the book, she was not, at least not yet. In the book, Hagrid goes into great detail about his and Maxime's trip to the mountains to recruit the Giants, but in the film, it was a very vague explanation, and Maxime was not mentioned at all. They made it seem like Hagrid went on his own. Umbridge then knocked on the door, and after the trio went under the invisibility cloak, the scene that took place before the trio arrived in the film actually took place after they arrived in the book. Another thing that took place before the DA montage was Hagrid's first class. In this class, Hagrid introduces Thestrals, and he explains that they can only be seen by people who have witnessed death. This differs from the film, as they were explained much earlier, and not by Hagrid, but by Luna. And now we get to the DA montage. The film shows Filch catching on to their plan, getting tricked by Fred and George's joke candy, and almost getting into the room, but none of this happened in the book. Filch nor Umbridge caught wind of where or when they were holding their meetings at this point. We also see a scene where Nigel and Harry demonstrate stunning, but this did not happen in the book, as Nigel was not a character in the novels. He was a character made just for the film, and was sort of a hybrid that replaced Dennis and Colin Creevey. The moment where Hermione and Ron face off, and Ron says he'll go easy on Hermione, only to lose in a very embarrassing fashion, did not happen in the book. Just another example of the films making Ron look weak and dumb, and making Hermione look like this perfect goddess. Also, Umbridge's decree of making students submit to questioning and giving them Veritaserum did not happen in the book. That decree was made just for the film. Also, in the book, they did not practice the levitating spell Levicorpus. They only did that in the movie. On top of that, this montage shows the formation of the Inquisitorial Squad, but they were not formed yet. They weren't formed until after Christmas break. When Harry goes over to Cho in the movie, he blows the twins off.
They give you these massive pus-filled balls, right?
Sounds great, guys. Would you excuse me?
But that never happened in the book. In the movie, there's a mirror with pictures on it, including a picture of Cedric, but this mirror wasn't there in the film, and there was no picture of Cedric. Cho just brought him up on her own. In the film, mistletoe just grows from the room, but in the book, this was Dobby's doing, as he had decorated the room for Christmas before everyone showed up. In the film, the trio all laughed together after Hermione said Ron had the emotional range of a teaspoon, but in the book, they did not laugh like this, and the scene continued. Instead of laughing, it actually got kind of heated, as Ron asked who Hermione was writing her novel of a letter to, and when she said Victor Crumb, Ron got very grumpy. During Harry's dream in the book when he was the snake, he attacked Mr. Weasley in the corridor that led to the Hall of Prophecies, but in the film, he attacked him in the Hall of Prophecies. In the book, he only bit him 3 times, but in the film, he bit him 5 times. In the movie, Harry woke up on his own, but in the book, he had to be woken up by Ron. Also, after he woke up in the book, he vomited over the side of his bed, but that did not happen in the movie. In the film, Harry got a flare of anger when Dumbledore would not look him in the eyes, and he yelled, "Look at me!" However, he did not yell this in the book. Instead, just as he and the Weasley kids were taking a portkey to Grimmauld Place, he made eye contact with Dumbledore, and this is where he got his flare of anger. However, he did not yell like this in the movie. He just got a strong urge to strike, bite, and sink his fangs into Dumbledore. Before he could act on it though, the portkey kicked into action and he arrived at Grimmauld Place. The movie skipped right to Christmas Day, but there was a lot that happened before that, especially that night. When they arrive at Grimmauld Place, Fred takes a low blow at Sirius about how he's not doing anything for the Order while stuck in the house, all because Sirius said they couldn't see their father yet. They all then sit in silence, staying up all night until Mrs. Weasley finally arrives and tells them that Mr. Weasley was going to be okay. In both the book and the film, Harry tells Sirius his concerns about being the snake in his dream and also wanting to attack Dumbledore.
When I saw Mr. Weasley attacked, I wasn't just watching. I was the snake. And afterwards in Dumbledore's office, there was a moment when I wanted to...
And in the movie, this leads to one of the most powerful scenes with some of the best dialogue in the series.
You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to.
But while he calmed Harry's nerves with the perfect words in the movie, Sirius did not calm Harry's nerves in the book, nor did he have this fantastic dialogue. Instead, he merely tells Harry that he needs sleep. This scene in the film ended with Sirius telling Harry that soon they'd be a proper family, and he hugged him.
When all this is over, we'll be a proper family.
A scene that is both heartwarming and absolutely tragic knowing what's going to happen. But this did not happen in the book. The scene in the book ends leaving Harry even more upset, as Sirius just walks out and leaves Harry standing alone in the dark. Also, just one more point, in the film this happened on Christmas Day, but in the book this happened a few days before the 25th. Another thing that happens before Christmas is everyone going to St. Mungo's Hospital to visit Arthur, a location that we never actually saw in the film series. Mr. Weasley is fine and in good spirits. Then, when the kids are kicked out and the adults stay in, the kids listen in with the extendable ears, and they all hear the adults say that Harry saw the vision because Voldemort was possessing Harry, something that was not really mentioned in the movie. On top of that, there's another scene before Christmas while at Grimmauld Place, where Harry is angry and lashes out at the others when they try to talk to him, but Ginny cuts in and points out that she's been possessed by Voldemort too. They then compare notes, and realizing that Harry doesn't have any blanks in his memory, Ginny declares that Voldemort has not possessed him, and this comforts Harry. The book and the film meet up again on Christmas morning, but how this day goes down is very different for each medium. In the movie, Arthur returns to Grimmauld Place and they have Christmas there. But in the book, Arthur had not yet been released, so they go to St. Mungo's to visit him. While there, we see Gilderoy Lockhart, who we find out still has not gotten his memory back and now resides at St. Mungo's permanently. While in Lockhart's ward, they stumble upon Neville and his grandmother. They were there visiting Neville's parents, who also resided there full time. When Neville's grandmother discovers that Neville had not told his friends, she tells her grandson that he should be proud of what his parents did, not hiding it. She then explains to the trio how Neville's parents had been tortured into insanity by Death Eaters. This moment in the book was of course replaced with the scene where Neville and Harry talk after a DA meeting, which also differs from the book, as Neville actually tells Harry what happened.
A Death Eater named Bellatrix Lestrange used the Cruciatus curse on my parents.
Whereas in the book, he doesn't tell anyone, his gran does it for him. While the movie cuts back to Hogwarts after Christmas Day, the book covers the rest of the kids' break, and on the last day before going back, Sirius calls Harry into the kitchen where he and Snape are sitting. Snape tells Harry that he will teach him occlumency in private lessons, something that differs from the film as they started their lessons before Christmas break, not after. Sirius and Snape then get into a heated argument, both taking low blows at each other until the Weasley family walks in and Snape leaves. Then, this is when Arthur returns home from the hospital, whereas in the film, he returned days earlier on Christmas morning. Before we get back to Hogwarts, we also see Sirius give Harry a wrapped package that contains a two-way mirror, an easy way for Harry to communicate with Sirius if Snape is being horrible. The movie also cuts how they got back to Hogwarts, which involved them taking the night bus that dropped them right at the Hogwarts gates. In both the book and the movie, we see Harry talk with Cho after Christmas break, but in the book, there's the added detail of Harry asking her out during this conversation, and they agree to go into Hogsmeade together on Valentine's Day. The next thing that happens in the film is the Azkaban Breakouts, but there's a lot that happens before this in the book. We see Harry start his occlumency lessons, which, as I said, differs from the movie because they started it before Christmas break, not after. There's an added detail to this first lesson in the book though, which was Harry realizing what the dark corridor he kept dreaming about was. He put together that it was the Department of Mysteries on the same floor that he had his trial, something that differs from the film as he does not figure this out until much later when he has the vision of Sirius there. Another moment that was cut from the film that was rather creepy and dark was a moment where Harry walked into his dormitory and all of a sudden he had severe pain in his forehead. He then neither knew where he was or who he was, but maniacal laughter was ringing in his ears. Ron slapping him in the face then made him come to, and he realized that he was the one doing the horrifying laugh. He then told Ron that Voldemort was very happy and something good happened for him. Then, this is when the book and the film meet up again, as we find out what made him happy the next morning, the Azkaban Breakouts. In the film, the newspaper only showed one photo, and that was of Bellatrix Lestrange, but in the book, the newspaper had all 10 faces of the escapees on it, not just Bellatrix. The next thing to happen in the film was the DA class that got busted, but there's a lot that happens before this in the book. We see Harry and Cho go on their date, and it goes terribly, ending in Cho crying and storming out of the shop they were in. After this, Harry goes to the Three Broomsticks where he said he would meet Hermione, and sitting there with her was Luna Lovegood and Rita Skeeter. Hermione then proposes that Rita write an article in the Quibbler that recounts Harry's night in the graveyard, and everyone agrees and does just that. Harry gets in trouble with Umbridge for doing the article, and she makes a decree banning the Quibbler, but this only ensured that everyone read it. After reading this article, Seamus apologized to Harry, but this differs from the film as it was the Azkaban Breakouts that made Seamus do this, not the Quibbler article. There were a few more things that happened before the DA got busted. We see another Quidditch match where Ron plays terribly and they lose to Hufflepuff. Harry also has a dream where he sees what Voldemort sees, and when he looks in the mirror, he sees Voldemort looking back at him in his own reflection, a moment that we see much later in the movie when Voldemort possesses Harry in the Ministry. Before the DA gets busted, we also see Trelawney get fired, a scene that in the film took place months earlier before the DA was even started or even an idea. Also, this happened in the entrance hall in the book, whereas in the film, it took place out in the courtyard. In the movie, the scene ends after Dumbledore says Umbridge cannot kick Trelawney off the school grounds, but there was more to this scene in the book. Firenze the Centaur walks in, and Dumbledore introduces him as the new divination teacher, meaning Umbridge could not find one of her own. We also see the Gryffindor's first class with Firenze, and then that's when the book and the film meet up again, as we get to the DA lesson that got busted. How this happened is very different when we compare the book to the film though. In the movie, Umbridge just burst her way into the room, but in the book, Umbridge did not do this. Dobby actually came and warned the DA members, which made everyone run for it. Malfoy ends up catching Harry, and he's brought to the headmaster's office. In the film, we find out that Cho betrayed them, but in the book, it wasn't Cho, it was actually her friend Marietta. And just as Hermione had planned, the jinx that she had put on the piece of paper that everyone signed made Marietta have the word sneak written across her face in pimples. The events that happen in Dumbledore's office are slightly different when we compare the book to the film. For one, as I said, instead of Cho being there, it was Marietta. Also, there was a moment where Umbridge lost her temper and started shaking Marietta until Dumbledore drew his wand to protect his student. In the film, Dumbledore disappears with the help of Fawkes, but before that happens in the book, he knocks everyone in the room out except for Harry, McGonagall, and Marietta. He talks to McGonagall and Harry briefly, and then that's when he used Fawkes to vanish, and when the others woke up, they had no idea that time had passed. After Dumbledore left in the movie, Kingsley said,
"Dumbledore's got style."
But this was not actually said by Kingsley in the book. This was said by the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black instead. Following Dumbledore's departure, this is when Umbridge started the Inquisitorial Squad, which differs from the film, as this was formed much earlier, being around the same time that the DA was formed. In the film, we see a scene where all of the DA members are in detention writing lines with Umbridge's special quills, but this did not happen in the book, as in the book, most of them were not caught since they ran, but in the film they were all caught with no chance to run, so it makes sense why they all had detention. Following this was the scene where Cho tries to talk to Harry, but Harry refuses since she snitched on them, and that's what ended their relationship in the movie. Meanwhile, in the book, the thing that ended their relationship was their first disastrous date, and then Cho getting mad at Harry for what Hermione did to Marietta's face, and Harry saying that he liked it. The movie cut out a scene where Umbridge tries to use Veritaserum on Harry, but he only pretends to drink the tea she gave him, so when she asked about Sirius's whereabouts, he lied and said that he did not know. In both the book and the film, we see Snape's worst memory, but how this happens is very different when we compare the book to the film. In the film, Harry uses a spell to go into Snape's mind, and he sees flashes of Snape's childhood and then his worst memory. However, this was actually two scenes from the book combined. In an earlier lesson, Harry had fought back and had accidentally gone into Snape's mind to see flashes of his childhood, whereas in the film, he did this on purpose. In that scene, however, Snape does not get mad and we do not see Snape's worst memory. It cuts out after the flashes of his childhood. It's not until another lesson that Harry sees his worst memory, and he did not see it using a spell, but rather saw it in the pensive when Snape left him alone in his office. There's also a lot more to this scene in the book, as we start out the scene in the Great Hall with the Marauders and Snape taking their OWLs, whereas in the film, we start out on the grounds of Hogwarts. After the test, the book catches up with the movie on the lawn, and we see James and Sirius bully Snape. In the book though, there's the added detail of Lily, Harry's mother, showing up. She tells James to stop bullying Snape and stands up for him, only for Snape to call her a mudblood. Then, the moment when Snape gets mad and ends their lessons is when he pulls Harry out of the pensive. After this in the film, it cuts to Fred and George deciding to leave Hogwarts.
I've always felt our futures lay outside the world of academic achievement.
This line was actually said much earlier in the book though, being at the very beginning of the school year when explaining that they only came back to test their products and figure out the kinks. Also in the book, there was a scene that happened in between Snape's worst memory and the twins deciding to leave Hogwarts. We see McGonagall have a meeting with Harry regarding career advice, but Umbridge is there as well, and when Harry says that he wants to be an Auror, Umbridge says that this would never happen. This makes McGonagall angry, and she stands up for Harry, saying that she would make him an Auror if it was the last thing she did. While Fred and George's last hurrah lasted only a few minutes in the film, this actually lasted a few weeks in the novel. The twins started messing with Umbridge right after Dumbledore left, long before Snape's worst memory, putting fireworks all over the school. Then a few weeks later, when Harry wanted to talk to Sirius and Lupin about the memory he had seen, the twins say that they can buy him some time to do so. Harry sneaks into Umbridge's office and talks to the two of them, and they assure Harry that James grew out of his bullying ways. Harry then successfully escapes Umbridge's office, and when he makes his way to the entrance hall, he sees Fred and George's last hurrah. However, while they were never even close to getting caught in the film, they were actually cornered in the entrance hall by Umbridge and Filch in the book. When Umbridge threatens them though, they call their broomsticks to them from Umbridge's office, which differs from the film as they already had their broomsticks in the movie. When they get their brooms, they fly away just like in the film, but there's two added details. One, they announce their joke shop that was opening in Diagon Alley, and two, they tell Peeves the Poltergeist to give Umbridge hell for them. The movie also added one detail that was not in the book, which was leaving the giant W in the sky, which I always thought was an amazing added detail. The movie cuts right from the twins' escape to Harry seeing the vision of Sirius, but there's a lot that happens in between these two scenes. We see the aftermath of what the twins had done, which extends well past a few fireworks like in the movie. They actually put a swamp in the middle of a corridor that Umbridge could not remove, so Filch had to help students across on a boat every day. Other students inspired by the twins then started to mess with Umbridge as well, with dung bombs, stink pellets, and releasing a Niffler in Umbridge's office. And most of all, Peeves gave Umbridge hell just as the twins had asked him to do. We also see the final Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. Right away, Ron lets in a few goals, but Harry and Hermione do not watch the rest of the match, as Hagrid calls them over to show them Grop, a scene that took place much earlier in the movie, taking place before Snape's worst memory and before the twins' escape. Also, unlike in the film, it's just Harry and Hermione there, as Ron was playing Quidditch. In the movie, Grop picked Hermione up, but in the novel, he only tried to, but failed when Harry pulled her out of the way. Also, Grop was much sweeter in the movie, giving them presents and smiling and laughing. Meanwhile, in the book, he just kept roaring. When they returned from the forest, Harry and Hermione heard the chanting of "Weasley is our king," and they dread going to the pitch, thinking that the Slytherins were chanting that for their victory. However, when they got closer, they saw the Gryffindors holding Ron on their shoulders, and they realized it was the Gryffindors chanting "Weasley is our king," having reworked the Slytherin song to celebrate their own victory. They had won the Quidditch Cup. In between the two scenes, we also see the 5th years taking their OWLs, which we saw a bit of in the movie, but it was very different. Umbridge did not give the exam, nor did any of the other teachers. They had examiners from outside come in, and they had a theoretical exam and practical exam for each subject, and the exams lasted for over a week, a different subject each day. During their OWL for astronomy, we see a scene that was cut from the movie, and that was Hagrid's departure from Hogwarts. Umbridge and 5 Aurors go to Hagrid's hut, which Harry and the others see on the astronomy tower. Hagrid runs for it, and when McGonagall comes out to defend Hagrid, she gets hit by 4 stunning spells at once and collapses, and later has to go to St. Mungo's hospital. This makes Hagrid angry, and he knocks all but one of the Aurors out, picks up Fang, and runs into the mountains. The next day, Harry has his OWL for History of Magic, and this is where the book and the film meet up again, as Harry has his vision of Sirius. While Harry was awake when he saw this in the movie, in the book, he had fallen asleep during his exam and he dreamt it. In both the book and the film, Harry sneaks into Umbridge's office to use her fireplace, but in the film, he had both Ron and Hermione there, while in the book, he only had Hermione, as Ron, along with Ginny and Luna, and later Neville, were causing a distraction for him to do so. Also, the reason why he wanted to use the fireplace differs from book to film. In the film, Harry was going to use the fireplace to travel to London, but in the book, the purpose of using the fireplace was simply to talk to Sirius at Grimmauld Place to make sure he was okay. When Harry makes contact though, Kreacher tells Harry that Sirius is in the Department of Mysteries, confirming Harry's vision. In the film, Umbridge slapped Harry across the face, but in the book she did not do this. Instead, she grabbed Harry by the hair and then threw him against her desk. In the film, Snape says that Umbridge used the last of the Veritaserum on Cho Chang.
Have you brought the Veritaserum?
I'm afraid you've used up all my stores interrogating students, the last of it on Miss Chen.
But in the book, he says that she used the last of it while interrogating Harry. Before Umbridge was about to use the torture curse on Harry in the book, there was the added detail of Umbridge admitting that she was the one who sent the Dementors after Harry last summer, which was never mentioned or brought up in the movie. In the movie, Hermione's plan was to lead Umbridge to where Grop was, but in the book, her plan was to just walk through the forest as loudly as possible to get the attention of the Centaurs. This also meant that Umbridge's dialogue about how she hated children was not in the novel.
I really hate children.
In the film, the Centaurs did not shoot an arrow at them until Umbridge insulted them.
Under the law, as creatures of near human intelligence. How dare you!
But in the book, the first thing they did was shoot an arrow being unprovoked. Also in the film, the Centaurs don't talk, but in the book, they talk quite a bit, and even yell when Umbridge insults them. In the film, Umbridge strangled the Centaur with ropes, but in the book, she just put it around his torso and arms and did not choke him. In the movie, Hermione tried to free the Centaur, but in the book, she did not do this, as the other Centaurs charged before she had the chance, and Harry pulled her to the ground. In the film, Harry said,
"Tell them I mean no harm!"
I'm sorry, Professor. I must not tell lies.
A line that was absolutely brilliant to add, as it was the perfect revenge for Harry. However, he did not say this in the book, as he and Hermione were picked up when Umbridge was as well. Then in the novel, Grawp came in, and because the Centaurs were already holding Umbridge, Grawp did not pick her up like in the movie. Also, Harry and Hermione did not watch the Centaurs take Umbridge away, nor did Hermione have time to thank Grawp like in the film. Instead, they were dropped when a fight broke out between Grawp and the Centaurs, and they ran away during the chaos. In the film, Harry and Hermione met the others on the bridge, but in the book, the others meet them in the forest. Also in the movie, Ron was the one who came up with the plan to escape.
How'd you get away? Puking past us. It wasn't pretty.
Told them I was hungry and wanted some sweets. Of course, they told me to bugger off and ate the lot themselves.
That was clever, Ron.
That's been known to happen.
It was brilliant.
Wow, look at that. A moment in the Harry Potter movies where they don't make Ron look like a complete idiot or weak. They actually make him look smart. See, this is why I love this movie more than the others. But in the book, it wasn't just Ron, as all of them worked together, and they didn't do it with candy, but they sent a bunch of spells and hexes. The movie cuts right from them flying the Thestrals to them in the atrium in the Ministry of Magic, but in between these two scenes, we see all of them land at the same telephone booth where Harry entered for his trial, and we see them enter through there. Now, there are a lot of differences when we compare the finale in the book to the finale in the film, so let's go over it. In the movie, they go right from the hallway that Harry had been dreaming about to the Hall of Prophecies, but there's a lot that happens before this. Instead of going straight to the Hall of Prophecies, they first end up in a circular room with a bunch of doors. They try each door, first entering a room containing a tank full of brains. Then they go back to the circular room. Then they go through a door that leads them to the room with the archway, which of course differs from the movie, because there, we don't see this room until after they face the Death Eaters in the Hall of Prophecies. Also, the archway in the book has a black curtain, while in the film, it was more of a force field type thing. In the novel, they then go back to the circular room, then they go through another door that leads them to the time room, and then this is when the book and the film meet up again as they enter the Hall of Prophecies. In the book, Ron finds the orb with Harry's name on it, but in the film, Neville was the one to find it.
It's got your name on it.
Which I always thought was an amazing decision on Goldenberg's part, considering that this prophecy was so close to being about Neville. When Harry picks up the orb in the film, it tells him the prophecy, but in the book, it does not do this. We do not hear the prophecy while in the Ministry, we hear it later while in Dumbledore's office. In the film, there was the absolutely incredible addition of Neville getting angry and almost cursing Bellatrix.
How's Mum and Dad?
Better now they're about to be avenged.
But this moment never happened in the book. When Harry gave the signal in the movie, all of the kids tried to stupefy the Death Eaters.
Now,
But in the book, they don't go after the Death Eaters, but knock the shelves over. This also differs from the film, as in the movie, we get the thrilling chase and fight scene in the Hall of Prophecies, which did not happen in the book, as they go straight to the door. Also, instead of all of them knocking the shelves over like in the book, it was just Ginny to do so in the film. When they go through the door in the movie, all 6 of them are together and they fall in the room with the archway. But when they go through the door in the book, Harry, Hermione, and Neville get separated from the other 3, and they don't end up in the room with the archway, but they end up in the time room. In there, we see Hermione get cursed, which knocks her out. Harry and Neville then carry her away, and they end up in the circular room just as Ron, Ginny, and Luna join them from another door. Ron is unfocused and giggly, while Ginny's ankle was broken. A big difference from book to film is the fact that the heroes actually get hurt in the book, whereas in the film they do not. Then, when they entered the brain room, Ron magically called one of the brains to him, and its tentacles wrapped itself around him. Luna and Ginny were then stunned by Death Eaters, and Harry ran away with the prophecy. Harry entered the room with the archway, but unlike in the movie, he was all alone. A little later though, Neville entered, and when Bellatrix realized who he was, a moment that in the film happened in the Hall of Prophecies, not in the room with the archway.
Neville Longbottom, is it?
She threatened to torture him, saying she would see how long it took before he cracked like his parents unless Harry gave up the prophecy. This differs from the movie, as all of his friends were being held captive, not just Neville. Again, unlike in the film where his friends did not get hurt, in the book, Bellatrix actually used the torture curse on Neville, which made Harry start to give up the prophecy. In the film, Harry actually gave the prophecy to Lucius, but in the book, he did not. He was only about to, but the Order showed up before he did so. In the movie, the Order flew in and the Death Eaters flew away. But in the book, neither the Order members nor the Death Eaters could fly like that. That was a power that they only had in the movies. Instead, the Order members just ran in from the doors and the Death Eaters didn't fly away, but simply ran for cover. In the movie, Sirius was the one to knock Lucius over, but in the book, Tonks was the one to do so. However, she did it with a spell. She did not punch him like Sirius did. In the movie, we see Mad Eye tearing it up on the battlefield with ease, but in the book, he was actually knocked out very early in the battle, and was later seen with his magical eye rolling on the floor next to his bleeding head. In the book, we also see Bellatrix take Tonks down, which we did not see in the movie. In the novel, the prophecy ended up in Neville's pocket, which ripped and the orb fell. Neville then kicked it thanks to a spell that made him lose control of his legs, and it smashed. This of course differs from the film, as Lucius was the one who smashed it, not Neville, when Sirius punched him in the face and he dropped it. In the book, Dumbledore appeared much earlier, joining the fight in the room with the archway, while in the film, he did not show up until Harry was in the atrium. In the novel, Sirius's last words were him taunting Bellatrix, saying, "Come on, you can do better than that." But in the film, his last line was, "Nice one, James!" A line that brilliantly relates back to what he said during their school days.
Nice one, James!
Also in the film, Harry was right next to him when he died. But in the book, Harry was all the way across the room, very far away from his godfather as he fell through the veil. In the book, Dumbledore rounds the Death Eaters up before his fight with Voldemort, but in the movie he does not do this, as he showed up and went straight to his battle with the Dark Lord. In the movie, Harry's torture curse works, but in the book, it doesn't fully work, and Bellatrix says that he has to want to cause her pain for it to work. In the movie, Harry and Bellatrix were face to face, but in the book, they were across the room, Harry hiding behind the Fountain of Magical Brethren. When Voldemort appeared in the movie, he tried to get Harry to kill Bellatrix.
She killed him. She deserves it.
But in the book, this did not happen. Instead, Harry told Bellatrix that the prophecy had been smashed, and when Voldemort arrived, he was not behind Harry egging him on, but right in front of him pointing his wand right at Harry. Also, Bellatrix was not excited to see Voldemort like in the movie, as she knew she had failed him by not getting the prophecy, so instead of laughing, she was absolutely terrified, begging for mercy. In the book, Voldemort sent a killing curse at Harry, but it was blocked when the wizard from the statue jumped in front of him, brought to life by Dumbledore, but obviously this never happened in the film. Dumbledore then made the rest of the statues come to life, and the statue of the witch ran after Bellatrix and pinned her to the floor, something that differs from the movie, as she was not caught, but rather escaped by running to one of the fireplaces. Dumbledore then made the statue of the wizard hold Harry back, another thing that differs from the movie, as Dumbledore himself was the thing that held Harry back during his fight. In the novel, Voldemort conjured a shield to protect himself from Dumbledore's curses, as they were too strong, another detail that was not in the film. The film also left out the conversation that Voldemort and Dumbledore had during their final fight, Voldemort saying that there was nothing worse than death, and Dumbledore telling him that his failure to understand that had always been his greatest weakness. The movie also cut out Fawkes swooping down and swallowing a killing curse that was about to hit Dumbledore, and Fawkes burst into flames and died. He was of course reborn from his ashes though, don't worry, Fawkes did not die here, he's alright. In both the book and the film, Dumbledore trapped Voldemort in a ball of water, and in the book, this is where the fight ended, as Voldemort disapparated out of it and disappeared, which of course differs from the movie, because the fight continued on past this, as Voldemort escaped the water, sent that black darkness at Dumbledore, then did that build-up explosion thing, and sent all of the glass remnants from the explosion toward him. But all of that was made just for the movie, none of that took place in the book. When Voldemort took over Harry's body in the movie, he said through Harry,
"You've lost, old man."
But in the book, he said, "Kill me now, Dumbledore. If death is nothing, Dumbledore, kill the boy." The scene where Voldemort took Harry over is vastly different when we compare the book to the movie. The movie did an amazingly powerful scene that I think trumps the book by a long shot. Goldenberg did an amazing job bringing the theme of the movie full circle, and it might just be my favorite scene in the entire Harry Potter film series. It goes back to what Luna says, a line that was literally made by Goldenberg as it was not in the book.
Well, if I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else. 'Cause if it's just you alone, you're not as much of a threat.
And they show Voldemort doing just that, as he makes Harry feel isolated and insignificant.
So weak. So vulnerable.
But then, when Harry's friends come in and he remembers what Luna said, we get this amazingly edited scene showing all of the happy times with his loved ones. We then get another amazing line made by Goldenberg that was not in the book that shows how Harry has grown as a character since the beginning of the film when he was isolating himself.
You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship, and I feel sorry for you.
And this love physically hurts Voldemort, making him leave Harry's body. In the book though, this scene lasts all of 7 lines. Harry thinks to himself that he wants to die so we can see Sirius again, and this bit of emotion pained Voldemort just like in the movie, but in a much less dramatic way, and he left Harry's body. In the movie, Voldemort returns after possessing Harry to tell him that he would lose everything.
And you will lose everything.
But in the book, he returned to retrieve Bellatrix, who was still trapped under the statue of the witch, and of course for both instances, coming back is what revealed him to Fudge and the others. In the movie, the scene ends here, but there's more to the scene in the book. Dumbledore shows himself to Fudge, tells him that he's detained the Death Eaters responsible for tonight, and threatens Fudge's orders, and Fudge reluctantly stands down. Dumbledore then told Fudge that he would remove Umbridge from Hogwarts, made Fudge have his orders stop hunting Hagrid, and he told Fudge that he was the headmaster again, all of which Fudge listened to and obliged. Dumbledore then sent Harry to his office using a portkey that he had made. In the film, it cuts to Harry packing his things in his dormitory, but before that in the book, we see Harry's talk with Dumbledore. There's also a lot more to this conversation in the novel, and I actually made an entire video on why this is the most important conversation in the entire Harry Potter series. The conversation starts with Dumbledore telling Harry that his friends were going to be okay, which differs from the film, as we found this out while in the Ministry when they came to check in on Harry, a moment that was of course not in the novel. The movie also cut Harry trashing Dumbledore's office, throwing things and breaking things, and Dumbledore just sitting there letting him do it. They also go over Kreacher's arc that was cut from the movie. We find out that he left Grimmauld Place, went to Narcissa Malfoy, and became part of the trap that Voldemort set up for Harry. And this is the reason why Kreacher lied and said that Sirius was in the Department of Mysteries when really he wasn't. Another thing that the movie left out in this conversation was the reason why Harry had to live with the Dursleys. This was because the protection that Harry's mother gave him through the power of love lived on in her sister Petunia, as they shared the same blood, meaning as long as Harry called the Dursleys' house his home, Lily's protection continued to protect him. Harry then puts together that that's what the howler Petunia received last summer was about. In the movie, we heard about the prophecy while in the Department of Mysteries, but in the book, we heard the prophecy during this conversation going into the pensive of Dumbledore's own memory as Sybil Trelawney told the prophecy. And that's another detail that was not mentioned in the movie, that Trelawney was the one who foretold the prophecy. Though it wasn't hard to put this together as it was clearly Emma Thompson's voice. We also did not hear the entire prophecy in the film, so let's go over it. In both the book and the movie, it starts out saying,
"The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches."
But it then skipped over the lines that said, "Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies." Then in both the book and the movie, it continues saying,
"And the Dark Lord shall mark him as his equal, but he shall have power the Dark Lord knows not."
But the movie then skips over the line, "and either must die at the hand of the other." Then in both, it continues saying,
"For neither can live while the other survives."
And the final line was cut off as well, which said, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies." The movie also skips over a very interesting point about how the prophecy could have been about Neville Longbottom as well, but because Voldemort chose to kill Harry in Godric's Hollow, it set the prophecy in stone that it was about Harry, not Neville. Dumbledore then explains that Harry's greatest power is love, something that didn't have to be explained here in the movie, as that was brilliantly the whole theme of the film, which we just have to give Michael Goldenberg a round of applause for. That was some brilliant writing and adapting. At the end of the conversation in both the book and the film, Dumbledore confirms that Harry has to kill Voldemort or Voldemort will kill him. And in the film, that's where the conversation ended. But in the book, there was one more added detail of Dumbledore explaining why he did not make Harry a prefect that year, saying that he had enough responsibility elsewhere. The movie cuts to Harry and Luna's talk, but there's a lot that happens before this that was not in the film. The film leaves out the fact that Lucius Malfoy was sent to Azkaban, and we see Draco threaten Harry in the hall for this. We also see McGonagall return from St. Mungo's Hospital after taking the 4 stunning spells at once during Hagrid's escape. When she returns, she awards Harry and his friends 50 points each for alerting the world about Voldemort. We also see Harry visit Hagrid, and when Hagrid says that Sirius would have wanted to die in battle, this upsets Harry so much that he excuses himself. On top of that, we find out that Dumbledore saved Umbridge from the Centaurs, and once she was released from the hospital wing a few days later, she gets chased out by Peeves whacking her with a cane that Harry was pretty sure belonged to McGonagall. We also see Harry packing, a scene that in the film took place much earlier, as it was the scene right after the Ministry scene. During this though, the movie left out the part where Harry found the two-way mirror that Sirius had given him during Christmas break, making Harry feel terrible as he could have used this mirror to avoid everything that happened, including Sirius's death. Harry then gets an idea, and he talks to Nearly Headless Nick to see if Sirius had become a ghost and to see if he could talk to Sirius, but Nick says no, as Sirius will have gone on. Then, this is where the book and the movie meet up again, as Harry and Luna have their talk. In the book, this is where Luna tells Harry why she can see Thestrals, a moment that took place at the beginning of the school year in the film, rather than at the end.
You've known someone who's died then?
My mum. She was quite an extraordinary witch, but she did like to experiment, and one day one of her spells went badly wrong.
The movie ends with a scene that wraps up the whole theme that Goldenberg perfectly illustrated in the screenplay, as Harry says,
But even though we've got a fight ahead of us, we've got one thing that Voldemort doesn't have. Something worth fighting for.
But this scene and this line never appeared in the book. That was made just for the film, and another brilliant line made by Goldenberg. While the film ended there was a different ending in the book. The book actually cuts right from Harry's talk with Luna to the train ride home. During the train ride, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle try to curse Harry, but most of the DA comes to Harry's defense, and Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle stand down. During the train ride, Harry realizes that he's moved on from Cho, because when he's told that she's dating Michael Corner, Harry realizes that he doesn't care. Ron then asked Ginny what happened, as she had been dating Michael Corner, but she said that they had broken up and that she was now dating Dean Thomas, a fact that wasn't shown until the next film.
Are you not currently dating Dean Thomas?
When they arrive at King's Cross, Moody, Tonks, Lupin, Mr. Weasley, and Hermione all approach the three Dursleys, and they threaten them, saying that there will be consequences if they discover that Harry is being mistreated. They all then say goodbye, and Harry leaves with the Dursleys. And there you have it, every single difference between the longest book in the series, the Order of the Phoenix book, and the Order of the Phoenix movie. Stay tuned for part 6 where I dissect every difference between the Half-Blood Prince book and movie, my favorite book in the series. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm just here to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed to the left. If you want to be featured on the next video, plus get a bunch of other things like previews and behind the scenes, become a patron today. Also, you can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life, like my cute dog Loki. I also do some fun stuff on TikTok and Twitter that I think you guys would really enjoy if you enjoy what I do here on this channel. As always, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great Movie Flame videos on the way.